And we're live.
Cool.
Hello, sir.
What up?
How you doing today?
I'm good. You?
Excellent. Good. A little tired. Got up for the sunrise,
Yeah.
so didn't get too much sleep. But the all of the sunrise, it was actually really cool today out on the beach. It was like it wasn't really even a sunrise. There was like a heavy storm out at sea, but it was kind of like parting just on the beach. So
Was it
the
was it foggy?
no, it was not foggy. Ironically enough. Um, but it was wild because the ocean took on this mercury type color, like a gray, um, like a shining grayish color, and the water there wasn't a lot of like white top, so to speak. So it was just it looked very, for
Was it
lack of a
was
better
it
word, like
glistening?
yeah, kind of.
Yeah,
It's wild. I was just like captivated by it for like an hour.
I bet.
But
Were you the only one there?
for the most part, the beach was pretty empty, especially
Yeah.
that early. There were a couple stragglers out there
Yeah.
walking around, but other than that, I love it in the mornings. It's
Yeah.
very peaceful.
Sounds very peaceful.
Yes, sir.
I woke up
Oh,
around 8 today, which also peaceful.
hmm yeah. I tried to go back to sleep, but I'm not too much of a napper, so I just like meditated like four different times for like 20 minutes. So kind of works out.
Does
Very
it help?
mellowed out.
Does it
What?
does it
Yeah.
help?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. For sure. There's a specific kind of meditation that I like to do. Is like I'll drink some caffeine and then meditate.
Mhm.
And I've read before that supposedly it the combination of caffeine while you meditate has some like amps up like cleaning processes in your brain. Like
Mhm.
daydream states do the same thing. They act as like mini like rejuvenation cycles for your I
Mhm.
guess uh, neural chemistry and uh, what's the word I'm looking for, byproduct toxic byproducts that build up, like
Mhm.
recycles them and recycles neurotransmitters or something like that. And supposedly caffeine speeds it up. I will say, like a caffeine meditation, I think like the focusing enhancements from caffeine increases the intensity of it, and it just seems to be a very solid little. They reinforce each other, so to speak.
Working
But
out for
yeah,
you.
oh yeah, that used to be like my go-to, dude. If during school and stuff, and like times when I didn't get a lot of sleep, I knew that if I slammed a bunch of caffeine and meditated for like 30 minutes, I'd have probably at least like a solid 2 hours of productivity or just
Yeah.
clarity, so to speak.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, well,
I'm not gonna go too far into that one. The only thing I will say is I only need like 25 minutes to nap. Like it'll take me like 5 to 10 minutes to relax myself, and then it's like a 25-minute nap, and then I naturally wake up, and
mhm.
and it's like at that point you have to get out of bed. Like you don't want to fall asleep again, right?
Yeah,
Like
because then you get
oh
like,
this feels good, and then just stay there. You want to get up right away. That's
mhm.
all you
It's
need.
wild how much of a difference that can make. Just
Mm-hmm.
getting up versus
Right.
laying in bed for a little bit, like
Yep.
it just creates a heavy lag
Mm-hmm.
and just becoming more alert.
Yeah.
But yeah, good stuff. Nice little
I'm
casual conversation.
I'm a full supporter of the naps.
Oh, 100%. I think we should be taking naps, especially like midday. Depending on when you wake up, it's sometime between like, I want to say like 1 and 4, where we have like a
People feel
natural dip in
right.
alertness, unless you're
People
caffeinated throughout the entire day.
right, and then you miss it. But
Hmm.
that's part of the issue too, right? Is like you're never really in tune with your energy levels. And
Hmm.
then depending on when you have the caffeine, if it's way too late in the day, you start to interrupt your natural sleep cycle as well.
Right. And then
So,
it's like a chain reaction of
right,
effects, and you sleep longer, and then it just
right.
continues to.
And you think you're good. That's the problem. Is like you think you're just like, no, I'm
Hmm.
not tired. It's like, yeah, because you always drink caffeine.
Hmm. You just don't realize it. You just become so attuned to that state where, like,
Yeah.
even though it's like Adderall, or stimulants, like, when you take those things, like, you feel as if you're smarter, more alert, more like just and that you do better work, so to speak. But
Right.
it's not the case. The work quality is the same. Now, you might be able to sit down and just work for longer periods of time because of how stimulated you get. But really, all the feeling is just from an enhance. You just get pleasure out of everything. Like it
Mm-hmm.
becomes exciting to wash the dishes, so to speak.
Yeah.
But the quality of the work isn't the same. But you don't recognize that because your emotional state
But you also
is,
can't like sustain that, and then you
oh no, it's
crash.
not sustainable at
And then
all.
that's what I'm saying. Like your body can't handle that. You can't do that all the time, and then you crash. And then when you crash, your body tries to readjust itself back to your natural rhythms, right? And then you're almost. I feel like you're almost upset because your natural rhythm is nothing like the state that you were just in, right? It's like
Yeah.
your natural state is not at that heightened, state of being. You know what I mean? It's totally different.
Yeah, and then I mean, not to talk about like you said, your body trying to reestablish its baseline. It's like that just those kinds of drugs just jack up dopamine. So, and that's and then to respond, your body down regulates its dopamine receptors. So basically, after you're off of it, um, it's harder to find pleasure out of activities
Right.
than it
And then
was
it's like,
before. And
oh,
then you
just
become
give me more
dependent on
Adderall.
it. Yes. And then thus we have a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
it's dangerous stuff.
oh yeah. And then you hide it in the fog. So might as well segue.
Perfect. What a nice intro.
It's all pretty smooth there. Segue into the third chapter, Rule 3 of Peterson's Beyond Order.
That was great.
And so, with that being said, formally speaking, the rule number 3 is do not hide unwanted things in the fog. What are you hiding, Keith?
You don't want to know.
No, I'm sure I don't. Some things are better
I don't
left
even want to
untouched.
know.
Well,
I don't.
that's the biggest thing, isn't it?
That's why the fog's there. I don't want to know.
It has its utility.
Yeah. Yeah. What do we want to talk about first?
Hmm. Well, he kind of, um, he kind of starts out with an example of relationships, like relationship with a significant other, and that's a very complex relationship, which by the time you're married, you're living with this person and you're interacting with them every day. And, you know, as same with siblings, like disputes can emerge, or there can be things that uh, you don't like that the other person is doing, so to speak. Like, well, not this isn't his example, but one example could be um, like
But
you come
that is
home.
part of the example. Like he
What?
does talk about something that eventually bothers him, right? That the other
Well,
person is
yeah.
doing.
I'm just not like specifically speaking.
Oh, okay.
Like I'm going to give an example, but it's not what he used.
Okay.
But it's the same thing. It's just in a different domain.
Cool.
So like, you come home from work and your spouse doesn't come up and give you a hug, or like say
Mhm.
hello and greet you at the door, and that like bothers you, but you kind of shrug it off.
Is this because they
And
always give you a hug?
you're adding too much context. You made me think too
But
hard,
like
man. I
but
told you I'm tired.
you're setting it up as if it's a problem that they didn't give you a hug, and like
Well, that's
sometimes
like
that
your
would be a problem. Is
expectation, so
like
to speak. Well,
exactly
yeah,
like
sure. Then they
if
used to
they
give
always
you
greet
hugs.
you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then they
Exactly.
stop, so to speak, and don't start again. And this is where the idea of the fog comes in. So, it's a one time right when you get home and you notice that they didn't do it.
Hmm.
And it like kind of irritates you a little bit, but it's like, okay, well, it's not a big deal as you say to yourself. So you kind of just push it to the side. And then well, time moves along, and these are the things, or things like this are repeatable events that happen every day.
Hmm.
So if the same thing continues to happen over and over and over and over and over again, and you continuously continue to do that and push it to the side, well, you push it out of your awareness, and eventually it gets to the point where you're just irritable when you come home and you don't know why anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say like it gives you a baseline irritability that is heightened, and then you get in a fight over something else small that has nothing to do with why you're actually angry, but to you it is why you're actually angry because you've buried um, the original issue in the fog, so to speak,
Right.
and that and because of that fogginess, your perception of what's causing you negative emotion is um, disoriented,
Yeah. I was
and
gonna say
then
distorted.
yeah,
Like,
distorted.
yeah.
Um, and so the idea is, I mean, I think throughout this chapter is that you know when things surface like that, to not ignore it, maybe not act on it, but to at least think it through and understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it could or for example, like it could start because it's contagious, so to speak, and it could start affect other areas of your life, um, just by increasing your, so to speak, baseline irritability or resentfulness towards anything. Well, the other thing is like, well, that's the thing is that if you hide that, you like the idea that I was saying is that you don't know what's causing it. So with those uh, with that distortion of your perception, um, well, it's just chaos. I don't really know how much further I can go with this, but that's
Well,
kind of
let
like
me.
my idea of like the general
No, I think
thoughts of the
that's.
chapter.
I think again. I think you summarized, his ideas perfectly. He gave a different example, just about like the dinner plate, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
being served lunch on a dinner plate, and for some reason like having an issue with it, but not saying it, and then eventually blowing up on his wife, was like the story, that he shared, and it's same concept. And the only thing I was gonna say is the emotional state. I wanted to like talk about that for a second because you talked about being irritable, and I think like that's one of the biggest things is just that your emotional state is being affected, and like you said, it's hard to understand like how much, like to what degree, and it is happening in these like you can connect it to these little events if you start to like analyze it, but when you don't, you are just kind of angry all the time, right? Like you said, you're kind of just reacting differently. um so again, just from that psychological standpoint, like you are being affected by this, and it's I love that he calls it the fog, because we talked about this kind of perception being like distorted, and I feel like even like a disorientation too kind of implies like being lost, right? Like having no
Mm-hmm.
direction. um and on a deeper level, it's like what is happening that you haven't figured out, like, and he talks about this later on when he talks about like what is the fog, and he talks about kind of like the complexity of life, and um, it, all the stuff that we experience is so complex. So if you don't take time to figure those things out, and the fog is kind of like this fog that just keeps expanding, and you're more and more kind of just lost in that, it's going to be much harder to find your way out of it too. It's, and I think that's been like a common theme for anything that we talk about is the longer you go without addressing these problems, the more you kind of suffer in a way, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
becomes more work to attend to them, or even you said earlier, when you hide stuff in the fog, um, eventually, like that one thing, that one trigger point that came up initially, you didn't even take time to think about it or address it, and then eventually it just kind of like disappears into the fog. And it becomes more work to kind of get out of the fog or go searching in the fog for um, answers to why it is that you're reacting certain ways. Um, and then I guess like to finish off what I was saying right here is this another way of talking about the unconscious? Like when we're talking about Jung and stuff like that, is that like is this the same way as talking about that?
Um, Well, that's where my line of thought was, or that's what I was thinking as I was reading and exploring these ideas, where it seems to be like, like, well, by hiding it in the fog is burying it in the unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Same, they seem analogous to me, or
Right.
to be describing the same thing.
Right, because
Um,
he even brings up deception, self-deception, and self-defense mechanisms, which again comes from like Freud and
mm-hmm,
other people, and so yeah, it's and again their theories were all based on this idea of the unconscious, right? Like this place that you push things down, you repress things, suppress things,
mm-hmm,
develop defense mechanisms so that you don't have to deal with them. And yeah, I think it is analogous to the fog.
mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting that he just presents it this way.
So, kind of, I think a nice next step that we can take is, the part on corruption, omission, and commission, which is kind of what you were just talking about with Freud. And
Wait. 1 second, 1 second. Let me,
mm-hmm,
since we're moving on to that, because I'm on that page, but right before that page, I have a quote. And this is my note at the bottom of it is how he starts off this chapter. Like we're kind of talking about what the fog is
mm-hmm,
and why it's important to face problems rather than avoid them. So
mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read this quote and then we can go right into that section that you were talking about. Um, Perhaps you think, moment to moment at least, that it is best to avoid confrontation and drift along in apparent but false peace. Make no mistake about it, however, you age as you drift, just as rapidly as you age as you strive, but you have no direction when you drift, and the probability that you will obtain what you need and want by drifting aimlessly is very low. Things fall apart of their own accord, but the sins of men speed their deterioration. This is wisdom from the ages. It may well be that the conscious apprehension of the horror of the same small hell forever repeated is precisely what is necessary to force you to confront the problems in your marriage and negotiate in good and desperate faith to solve them. However, it is the easiest of matters, particularly in the short term, to ignore the prick of conscience and let the small defeats slide day after day. This is not a good strategy. Only careful aim and wakeful striving and commitment can eliminate the oft incremental calamity of willful blindness, stem the entropic tide, and keep catastrophe, familial and social alike, at bay.
Uh, all right, little hiccup. We back. Um, but no, that quote does a great job in kind of just summarizing the complexity of the situation and kind of just outlining, what's causing it, um, what happens, and then what happens as a result of continuing with it in regards to drifting aimlessly um, through your life um, without being able to orient yourself properly
Mm-hmm.
because you have one too many things in the fog.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man.
But is there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, no. I just like the idea of confronting things that bother you. And again, I know we're going to talk about this as we move forward. That's why I just kind of wanted to like throw a quote in there because that's
Mm-hmm.
from the first section of the chapter. And I just love when he talks about things like uh, wakeful striving and commitment can eliminate the oft incremental calamity of willful blindness. Like for me, that's what it is. It's like that willful blindness is the perception is like the perception of the fog is only it's a result of willful blindness, which is so interesting because it's like you turn your um the way you're by not confronting things, you're blinding yourself to the problems. And what's funny is it appears as fog, right? Like it's like, why am I in this mess? But you did it yourself, right? Like the fog is your own doing in a sense. So it's just very interesting.
So the next part, segueing in, is kind of um, like more dives into the complexity of, you know, of what produces hiding things in the fog, or or what you're responsible for. And there's one thing that I wanted to, or I'll start out real quick, because I think it's an important idea, in that. So I'll read it. Logicians are not psychologists. However, they obviously do not notice, or else fail to take into account, the fact that they themselves have family members, for example, for whom they at least occasionally feel love and hate at the same time. So I think here it's just like highlighting that point that, you know, we are extremely complex in our emotions and um, social relationships have many, many layers of information and being passed back and forth at any given time, that you can have contradictory feelings at the same time towards
Yep.
another person.
Yep.
Like, I really like what you did here, but I also don't like what you did here. So the idea is whether you're willfully blind in that you just choose not to accept that you can harbor any kind of bad feelings towards a family member, or whether you truly believe that um, there's only love that exists within that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
It causes you to, I guess, fail to see those little things, or fail to recognize the negative emotions that you have towards specific events that happen on a daily basis, and overlook them. I
Right.
guess is kind of what that quote made me think about.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I feel like that you have to like begin to understand why you're reacting the way that you are, and it's almost like you have to understand that before you can even kind of understand the relationship too, right? Like it's like depending on how you reacted or what you did, like taking time to understand that and then saying to the person like how can I say this to you, because that might cause a problem too, right? And it's like you can't even say that to someone if you don't understand why it was a problem in the first place, or where those emotions kind of surfaced from.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very complex, and especially when it involves other people, which
Mm-hmm.
is most of our life.
Well, and I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but um, oh no, did I just lose my thought?
Catch it. Catch it.
Hold up. Ah, I got it. Brought it back. Um, no, I didn't. Just kidding. Wait, repeat what you just said.
I know you got it. I was just saying it's we live in a world with other people, right? Like they goes back to rule
Oh,
one.
yes. I remember. Um,
Oh shit, I gotta plug my
well,
back in.
that's the thing with all that complexity. Take your time. Somebody's unprepared today. Not fully charged and set up to go.
You can edit that out, right?
What?
You can edit that out, right?
Oh no, I was just talking shit on you while you were gone.
That's fine.
Gotta keep that.
We don't need to edit that out.
But yeah, like you said, like how complex these relationships are, and the many layers of meaning that they possess, in that, like you said, the importance of understanding yourself and your emotions, and then the importance of communicating that, because you might be like, what you think, like it might you might be like, for example, back what I was saying earlier, like you have a higher baseline irritability, or being irritable maybe from something at work, and you go home and let it out on your spouse, so to speak, and it had nothing to do with that. And then if you let it out in a accusatory manner, then it creates it moves the other person into a shutdown defense mode, rather than integrating what you're saying and thinking about it. So it's like, to talk about it in a way like, hey, like, this is how this made me feel. I'm not sure if I'm justified in my negative emotion towards you because of this, or if it's actually something else. Can we talk about it? And it just, there's a way of conversing with each other that shuts down dialogue and that opens it up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that's a little bit further into the chapter, but I just wanted, it made me think about that. Um, but and you know, we have a strong idea of taking action in a negative way as being a bad thing that leads to, like, by taking action in the wrong way. But we underlook, as Peterson outlined here, that by not taking action can be just as bad, just as bad as taking action. I got the hiccups.
Oh boy. this, this recording's done.
Oh man. Uh,
Gotta stop to charge batteries. We got hiccups. We got bathroom breaks. No one's watching these.
my favorite part. People left after. Oh. All right.
That's great. Your hiccups are like, they're intense. Why are they so
Comment if you know how to
intense?
stop hiccups.
Why are they so intense? Why do they look like they really hurt?
Have you ever burped and hiccuped at the same time?
Maybe.
That hurts.
Did you just do it?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Whew. All right.
And action.
I think we're good.
All right. Wait, be like action. Yeah. Action. Go.
It's like no, you have to like
It's like this, right? Like it like chops down.
boom.
Action.
We're starting.
Cool.
Okay, omission. Not taking action and taking action. Go.
Oh, it's my turn. I do have something to say.
Yeah, go for it.
All right, so we're in this chapter called Corruption, Commission, and Omission.
Heading.
And he talks about deception and he talks about self-deception. And I have a note here and I have like some stuff highlighted and I'm trying to think if I need to read it to really get these ideas across. Freud defense mechanisms. The former problem. Like the one thing I wanted to get at is there's something along the lines of I have to make sure I'm not getting my other book mixed up with this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so he talks about disassociation of thought and action is necessary for abstract thought even to exist. Thus, we can clearly think or say one thing and do another. This is fine when merely thinking prior to acting, but perhaps not so good when we promise or claim to believe something and then act in a manner indicating that we truly have faith in something else. This is a form of deception, a disjunction in character, a contradiction between modes of being. Um, so again, like just this idea of like deceiving yourself, and when you finally act something out and you know that you believe in something else and you're acting indifferent to your core beliefs, right? That's the self-deception that's very harmful. And it's and I feel like, so we were talking about emotions earlier. For me, emotions seem to be the indication that something is um standing out to you, right? Like it's like a beacon, and it's like it's reminding you that, or not reminding you, it's alerting you that you do believe something a certain way and this is causing you to react in a certain way. And instead of saying no, it's fine, like your spouse, right, says something or does something, and you just brush it off. No, it's fine. You don't believe that. You just did it. And
You
for
think
me,
you
it's like
believe it.
those things happen so often, I think, that that's the issue, right? Is like over the long term, you're ignoring these things, it becomes foggy, and you really have no clear understanding of why your relationship is in the place that it's in when you start having the serious problems, right? And you alluded to that earlier, and I feel like that's just the essence of this chapter and him talking about this idea of self-deception. Just it's 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 just another way of saying you're avoiding the truth of the situation, right? You're avoiding the truth of how you feel, how you think, you're acting differently. And for me, those three things, right? If you look at this from like what's it like cognitive behavioral therapy talks about the dynamic of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors together. Um, your everything is contradicting all of those things, and you're not paying attention to any of it. So again, it just becomes very messy, right? Um, and when we're talking about psychology, and I would say if you're thinking about how to grow and how to develop and mature psychologically, you can't avoid those things. Like you can't lie to yourself. You can't avoid truth. At the core, it's like that the truth of the situation is what you can't avoid. And whether that's how you feel emotionally or what you're thinking or what you're doing, it's better to confront those things.
Hmm.
So I love when he talks about that idea of self-deception, because I feel like it's a indirect way of saying there's truth that you're avoiding, right? Truth is at the center, and you're kind of like going in a different direction away from it. Um, so yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, no, to build off of that a little bit, like as we've continuously talked about the deep complexity, and now that we're bringing self-deception in, um, it might not even, it's not going to be entirely obvious if you're deceiving yourself too. Like it might be your intentions might be out of good faith, but and so this is where, because of how complex everything is, to know for sure is to think that you can know for sure when you're deceiving yourself or when you're not, um, just isn't true. And a lot of times you might understand, and a lot of times you won't. And he's emphasized this in this chapter, that kind of having a predisposed attitude of humility in this regard at least keeps your perception open so that you can catch these self deceptions when they're not blatantly obvious, so to speak. But it also requires attention, like to for you to attend to your experience throughout the day, and to um, mindfully, not just running with emotions in a dreamlike, unconscious manner. Where you, and I think this is another layer of complexity with relationships, is as um, relationships uh, as the interactions increase, or like the length of interactions that you have, or like how long you're with somebody, so to speak, the level of, or the amount of interactions that can slide into kind of automatic, unconscious, um, uh, unconscious communications, or like a flow with each other, because you're doing the same thing every day, so it's almost unconscious, where you it requires very little thought because of how often you've done it. It's just like riding a bike. The first time you ride a bike, you need to really think about how to pedal the steering wheel, but then after so long, you can get lost in a daydream of thoughts while you're still doing all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing applies to our relationships and how long we've been with people. And there's going to be certain cues that predispose you to certain behavioral patterns. And our brain builds all that up so that it's an energy conserving process where, um, to use conscious willpower and thought to change an action, so to speak, is energy extensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we build habits, and we automate our actions throughout the day as much as we can to conserve that, to conserve energy and resources.
Right. So very beneficial, but in the same way can also be very harmful. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a great way to kind of understand that from both, both sides, and understanding that you have to like be able to differentiate the events in your life to know when it's beneficial and when it's harmful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like that.
Um, so I guess the next, this chapter was so quick.
I mean, it really
Um,
was. I just felt like it was very straightforward.
mm-hmm.
I think it was, probably one of the easier chapters for, everyone to understand. And it's, yeah, I don't know. But I also think I think in some ways too, though, like you just kind of talked about this indirectly. You didn't like really go in deep about it, but sometimes it's difficult to know that we're doing something that creates the fog, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that we've either avoided having the talk, or whatever way that kind of happens. This is kind of like a chapter it's very very straightforward, but also can create awareness for someone to again start asking yourself questions about, am I guess like to think about how you're reacting to situations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or to consider your beliefs, or to think about your emotions, and just to kind of reflect on those, and to create that self awareness, and to say, how foggy is my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so sometimes it's almost like it's awesome that it's so straightforward, but it can be so transformative at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't always have to be something that you have to decode in this book or from people. Sometimes the simple things are, just enough. Um, so yeah, it was a good chapter though. Good
Oh
read.
yeah. Um, well, I guess we can kind of talk about characteristics of the fog and kind of what Peterson sees as why it's there and like our relationship to it, so to speak. Um, I can read this little part right here from him on page 101,
Where on 101?
top, starting at Imagine.
Okay.
I'm going to read that part.
Yeah.
Um, Imagine more precisely that you are so afraid that you will not allow yourself even to know what you want. Knowing would simultaneously mean hoping, and your hopes have been dashed. You have your reasons for maintaining your ignorance. You are afraid, perhaps, that there is nothing worth wanting. You are afraid that if you specify what you want precisely, you will simultaneously discover, and all too clearly, what constitutes failure. You are afraid that failure is the most likely outcome. And finally, you are afraid that if you define failure and then you fail, you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was you that failed and that it was your fault. So to me, that's just kind of a little summary of what I kind of got from that is that that can be uh, it's a form of paralysis of self consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
um, where by well thinking too much.
So
I
many
don't know
noises today.
what.
We got just real quick. We got my brother who's probably in the recording. We got people mowing the lawn. All those things that happened earlier. This is just the beginning. I love
Oh, it's a great day.
it.
um, but yeah, that like we can overthink in a negative way, and that's kind of like what like anxiety is, or like more extreme forms like agoraphobia, where like if you go outside, then you might get hit by a car, or if you so it's a very what this quote is showing is like kind of a narrow viewpoint of where you can become overwhelmed with thoughts of failure. And so, in order to avoid the emotional pain of being wrong and failing, you bury it and don't even want to look at it. However, can I help you?
Sorry. No. This lawnmower is so loud. I'm
I
trying
can't hear
to.
it, fortunately.
Oh, really?
No, I can't hear it.
Oh, okay. That's good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, all right, cool.
Keith doesn't have schizophrenia, I promise. He's not hearing stuff.
You
I
don't,
mean,
you
maybe,
don't
I
know
don't
that.
know.
You don't know that.
Oh, man. Where was I? You can finish my thought for me.
um, I mean, I really like the quote that you read. Yeah, just kind of like it turns in, like he's talking about failure too, and you were talking about anxiety.
Well, it's kind of like it's similar, but it's not the same. So um,
Well, I
like
mean, this makes me think of school though, right? Like that idea of what's it called? Imposter syndrome. So like maybe that's not necessarily it, but it's linked to that. But just that idea of like feeling like a failure in some cases might prevent me from like attending to all the things that I need to attend to. And what I mean is, like, what I get from this paragraph too is there's a sense of responsibility that comes along with um, that kind of just kind of like with you what it is that you're experiencing in your life, right? Like the
mhm,
things that you're committed to. Like earlier we talked about a relationship. Well, you're committed to that person. So when things start going wrong, you have a responsibility to make things better, to figure out where did we go wrong, what's happening. And I think part of this too is like when things go wrong, it appears as I failed, right? That's what
mhm,
we place that burden on ourselves to feel this sense of guilt and shame and failure, and it prevents us from confronting what it is that the problem is. Instead, just kind of perpetuates this fog and leaves you like you said, I think you said like paralyzed. I think like a type of paralysis is a perfect way of describing it. Sometimes it's you just you don't do anything.
mhm,
Well, I think in some cases you don't do anything, but I also think in some cases you do something like you drink. You know what I mean?
mhm,
People turn to drinking, so there's a lot of avenues that can go to. But
mhm. Oh yeah, and to like wrap it up with like another comparison, like with a significant relationship, it's like when you take a leap with of trust and put that into another person and that high of a regard as a significant other, and it breaks, it's extremely painful. And so there's a tendency to want to avoid that and not do it anymore. And so you don't ever take that leap anymore. And I think that's kind of what he's saying here is, um, and then you sort of paralyze yourself by over exaggerating the potential negative outcome, and then with that, and that justifies that it's not worth taking responsibility to go or to take that leap or to go and solve these problems because, well, you're trying to justify your way out of it, so to speak. But in
right,
the end, I think the downfall of not taking the leap and not doing it might alleviate negative emotion in the short term, but it's going to strip you of your vitality and lead to a form of bitterness and resentment in the long run.
right. And I also think like I think there is like because you're deceiving yourself. Remember you talked about energy earlier, and I think
Mm-hmm.
there's this there is energy that is kind of being directed towards that like repression, right? Like it's like this thing, whatever it is that is happening, keeps popping up. And I think when it does, especially at the initial stages, I think it's there's a lot of energy that goes into, hey, let me do whatever it is, whatever self-defense mechanism it is, let me exert some energy into activating that self-defense mechanism and pushing away that thing that's coming up that's making me feel uncomfortable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think like that too, like it's exhausting. And I think it just goes to show that like that we have this responsibility to address these things. There's going to be discomfort along the way, but like you said, like addressing it and finding solutions to the problem, so to speak, is the the result, and the way that you feel, like even though there might be some discomfort in the moment, the benefits are going to outweigh um the other side of that
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to the when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think again that's just something that I just know I'm personally guilty of that because it takes work, right? Like it
Mm-hmm.
requires a lot of you to address these things. Um, and just as like a personal experience that I want to share is I've I think like one of the reasons chapter sticks out to me and it seems so easy to like kind of understand is because I've taken it upon myself to try to have conversations with people when I notice like the energy's off, and I notice whether it's in myself or them that something is out of place. It's like we're not synchronized, and there's I'm very aware of something, not always like exactly what it is, but noticing something is wrong. And it's like it takes work. It takes saying, "Hey, I feel like something, when we hung out, something wasn't right." And it's almost like you say that and you feel the other person like almost like it could even be like a metaphorically like deep breath that's not they really don't take it, but you feel it. And they're so relieved that you asked that question because they weren't going to ask you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like you're both in the fog, but once you say it, I feel like both people in that fog metaphorically kind of think they saw a light shining through the fog.
Mm-hmm.
So now you at least have a direction to go in. And I've just kind of made it a point to try and work on being aware of those things when they happen and doing more of the confrontational work as opposed to the avoiding. Um, and yeah, it's not easy. It's not
Oh
easy.
yeah.
It takes a lot of work.
There's I want to read something from him that I think will provide a nice little summary and conclusion of what we've kind of been talking about the past couple minutes. On starting at 104, the last paragraph, and then continue on to the next page a little bit.
What page?
104, last paragraph, and then continuing on to the next page a little bit.
Okay.
Someone with experience knows that people are capable of deception and willing to deceive. That knowledge brings with it an arguably justified pessimism about human nature, personal and otherwise. But it also opens the door to another kind of faith in humanity, one based on courage rather than naivety. I will trust you. I will extend my hand to you, despite the risk of betrayal, because it is possible through trust to bring out the best in you and perhaps in me. So I will accept substantial risk to open the door to cooperation and negotiation. And even if you do betray me in a not too unforgivable manner, assuming a certain degree, shall we say, of genuine apology and contrition on your part, I will continue to extend my hand. And part of the way I will do that is by telling you what I am feeling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
admit your feelings is so even like where that or that paragraph started. I always highlight questions that stand out to me in blue. And so the question was, so what might you do? What should you do as an alternative to hiding things in the fog? And then his answer and what you just kind of elaborated on is admit to your feelings.
mhm,
And then also a part of what you just read is just that idea of just how to communicate to somebody. and just there's another element of trust that's in there too. um, but yeah, like you said, despite the risk of betrayal, um, because or what is it, through trust to bring out the best in you and perhaps in me. um, that's like heavy stuff, right? Like that idea of betrayal too, like people react very um, I don't know the word for that, but just like betrayal really tends to hit people too, right?
It's
Like
one of
that.
the. I feel like it's one of the hardest hitters
Yeah, yeah,
when
because
someone
of
betrays trust,
right,
because of how hard it is to offer trust, and
exactly.
to offer you trust is to is to make yourself completely and wholeheartedly vulnerable to the other person.
Yep. Yeah. So that is, yeah, definitely a heavy one to take in. But yeah, I love that. Just admit to your feelings too. And it's like just acknowledging that, because feelings are, associated with emotions. And there's just so much there that that's something too where I know that I'm not completely aware of my feelings all the time. And I don't think I grew up being taught or mentored or um, to pay attention to those things. It was more of suppressing those things.
Mhm.
And so now that's something that, again, is kind of something that I'm always trying to be more aware of. Because it seems to me that they are, there's messages there, like you said, there's information in those feelings that are just waiting to kind of be understood, to help you along the way, just to
Mhm.
make things easier.
100%. Um, I don't have much else.
Oh, well, hold on. So we're talking about communication, right?
Hmm.
So I love this. So this is the paragraph right under that. So following everything that you just said, and he says a certain necessary humility must accompany such raw revelations. I should not say, at least not ideally, you have been ignoring me lately. I should say instead, I feel isolated and lonely and hurt and cannot help but feel that you have not been as attentive to me over the last few months as I would have liked, or that might have been best for us as a couple. But I am unsure if I am just imagining all this because I am upset, or if I am genuinely seeing what is going on. And that's the end of the quote. And again, I think that's just one of those things, like he's offering a way of communicating with somebody where you're acknowledging that it's maybe you misinterpreting your feelings, which you're communicating to the person that you're having that interaction with, or the feelings are telling you that something about the other person is off. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, and I love that he puts that in there, because something as short as "you have been ignoring me lately," that just gets blown out of proportion.
It's
That
accusatory
Right.
too.
And that next, yeah, and you get defensive, and there's just not much there. This other one, just, take a deeper breath, take a few more sentences and lay it all out, and offer, is it me? Is it you? Can we figure this out? It's more collaborative.
Hmm.
And I just think that's so effective. And I think that's such a good example in the book of, again, creating awareness of how you can just in such, like, that's the work that you have to put in, right, is figuring out how to communicate in that way. But
Hmm.
it's like three more sentences, so it's like when you start to figure out that you can communicate a little bit better by offering just a little bit more, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit of work at first, but over time that just becomes a part of you, and it actually helps in all of your relationships, and it helps you to be more aware of both sides of the coin there.
I love it. Um, I think I want a point that I just thought about that I'd like to make too. Is like um, the idea is like um, re- hiding stuff in the fog. The fog signifies unexplored territory. And while we we can put a lot of focus on it being daunting to go there and highlighting the dangers of it. Um, not the positives also are just as prevalent in it. Not only can it, um, you could say, revive your relationship and fix the problems, but at the same time pave way for new meanings to come out of it and deeper meaning within it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this sense of, because if a relationship was all perfect and no problems ever came up, there is a sense of, for example, like in past classes that have been very difficult for me, like orgo, um, the people that I studied with and went through that class with, because it was a very difficult and enduring and unknown territory for all of us as we were exploring something that's akin to a new language. Um, our bond and um, friendship grew so much more, and not because the way that we would approach it is like, this is a problem and we're not attacking each other. We have to keep the problem where the problem belongs. Where so often, if we start attacking each other, say my answer is right, no, your answer is wrong, or your answer is right, my answer is wrong, with that versus here's the problem, here's what I have, here's what you have, let's see what we can do and see who's right. And it's like there's like that humility comes into play, but within that and overcoming problems to reach a shared goal, like we have to keep the goal in mind too. For a relationship, the goal is a harmonious relationship where we're growing together and
Mm-hmm.
discovering new meanings that can come out of it and fulfillment that can be obtained. And with a shared goal, it helps to, and by articulating that before going into, like, the thing is like, why aren't you coming up to the door and hugging me when I get home versus like, I still feel the same love for you that I did on the first day that I met you, and that I want this to continue. But this is how I'm feeling, and I want to get back there. Like, you're highlighting a goal, a genuine goal that you want to get to. And so it can take the focus off of the specific thing, and it can also help you recognize everything else that's going right. And that's an important thing too, to, if you're gonna, like, maybe like if you want to confront something about something they're doing that's creating a negative affect in you, maybe it's a good idea to start with a lot of the things that they're doing that you enjoy, and and then segueing into it, because that can also open up that dialogue for a genuine flow of communication too.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it shows the intentions, that, like, that you're not just highlighting the bad. Because I mean, if you just go, it's the same thing as, like, it's like if you say, like, oh, you're a bad wife because you didn't hug me. It's like, okay, well, that takes the level of analysis from this one specific action to all the way up the tree to everything that she does, so to speak. And it calls it all into question. Well, no wonder the person's going to get defensive about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's important to keep issues on the level that they arise in, I believe.
I like it. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't know where you were gonna take that when you started talking about the school stuff, but I think I still have to like think about some of that a little bit. But I think I like what I'm hearing. I do like the idea. Like again, I think when talking about just the communication aspect, yeah, I mean just communicating the goals too. I think like when we're talking about the complexity of life, even if you isolate a relationship, which is an aspect of life, even the relationship itself is very complex and there could be a lot of goals. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when it comes to something like acknowledging that something was different too, I think you're also just opening up the door to like, if nothing has changed in you, you're trying to figure out what changed in them, right? um and yeah, I just think with what you said and the quote that I read, there's just there's always going to be a better way to go about it than just accusing somebody, right? Like, and by not acknowledging that, like, maybe there is something that even you did that you were unaware of, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the humility that you were talking about. It's that it's very possible that it's something I did, so let me present it in that way and say, hey, is it you? Is it me? Is it us together? What
Mm-hmm.
happened? And kind of, like you said, establishing a goal, which is to resolve the issue and not to kind of like, why can't I think of the word? Attack and kind of not destroy, but like tear each other down, right? The
Mm-hmm.
idea is not to tear each other down, not to be malicious towards each other. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, I think it's just really good stuff, and I think it's, again, I think this is just one of those things because we all have, whether it's our relationships with our family members or, you know, intimate relationships that we may have had, um, or even just, just like a relationship with like a teacher at school. Like there's so many different
Mm-hmm.
types of relationships, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think all of us has probably experienced this in some way and just thought to themselves, I either didn't communicate what I was really feeling, which is the fog. And if you are aware of the fog, understanding that there's a point where you didn't communicate effectively.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just this chapter just really, I think, creates that awareness of how that occurs, why it occurs, and why it's important to not avoid it.
Mm-hmm. 100%. Um, if you don't have anything else, the final paragraph I highlighted as a. He always has a nice closing paragraph at the end of all of his or at the end of each of his chapters, or at least so far. If you have anything else before that.
No, I think it'd be cool if, like, this is a chapter where, because I feel like he's just restating the same thing over and over
Mm-hmm.
and like kind of just really hammered it into your brain. Like, it's not too it's not too complex. He's telling you that life is complex. Like, that's on your own time. You're gonna have to figure out. You're gonna have to navigate through the complexities of your own life to figure out your fog and how these things, like your self defense mechanisms and whatever it is that you do uniquely, is manifesting, right? But I think this is one of those chapters that's very relatable and I think easy to take in and understand. So
Mm-hmm.
it'd be cool to kind of, like, let's just say we did a do-over of this recording where like we kind of talk briefly about the chapter, just
Mm-hmm.
those core ideas, and then if you had a person come on and talk about like how we share some of our personal experiences, but their personal experiences about have they experienced the fog, what is their version of the fog,
I
and
like that.
share some stories. I
Mm-hmm.
think this is one more like, I want to hear more stories.
I
What's
think
the
they're
what
very
does the
powerful
fog
too.
mean? Yeah, what does the fog mean to everybody else?
Mm-hmm.
And just, and I think that's, again, you have to be pretty vulnerable to come on and share some of those stories, but I think that'd be really cool.
I love it. I love that idea.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody is interested, post a comment.
We need like an add-on.
I'll throw it up on Craigslist. Vulnerable people wanted.
It's one of those things, like, I feel like strangely, or like we'd get a lot of hits
Or
of
Reddit
that.
would probably work.
Yeah, yeah. This day and age, it'll definitely work.
Oh yeah. Keep
That's
it
funny.
anonymous too.
Yeah. Oh, I guess you could, like, if people wrote about it, and then we could just
Yeah,
read,
we
like,
could like recite
oh, I love
their
that.
writings.
I wasn't even thinking about that. Yeah, I love it.
I think that'd be some people would be who would
Yeah.
want to share but might not have the or a little bit speech anxiety, which I still have a tremendous amount of speech anxiety, so completely understand that one.
Yeah.
But it would allow them for them to share as well.
That's all. That's a great idea. Maybe we should do that.
We should.
A part B.
Part B.
Rule 3, part B.
And that's the thing is, like, I was learning from one of the previous chapters is that we pass how we pass a tremendous amount of information is through stories to each other, and
Mm-hmm.
by hearing each other's stories, it's like, well, maybe your story didn't reach people, but if there's a slight nuance on somebody else's story, it just opens up a vista for others who could possibly relate to that, and you just never know. And I've always found great power I've always gotten great insight from hearing about other people's stories of their life experience regarding something that I might have, that I can relate to in some way or another. Because you also, the slight differences in their storyline, so to speak, opens you up to, perspectives that you might have missed in your own, and can allow you to understand your own experience a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think it, again, like opens up the door to just a little bit more just analysis, right? Like you said, the nuance and picking out very different, those small subtle details that everyone experiences uniquely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's just, yeah, it's just really cool.
100%.
Cool. Yeah, finish it off.
All right, here we go.
Oh.
It's gonna be a deep one. No, just kidding. All right, here we go. With careful searching, with careful attention, you might tip the balance towards opportunity and against obstacle sufficiently so that life is clearly worth living, despite its fragility and suffering. If you truly wanted, perhaps you would receive. If you asked, if you truly sought, perhaps you would find what you seek. If you knocked, truly wanting to enter, perhaps the door would open. But there will be times in your life when it will take everything you have to face what is in front of you, instead of hiding away from a truth so terrible that the only thing worse is the falsehood you long to replace it with. Do not hide unwanted things in the fog.
Boom.
And I think there's another bit here, which is a kind of genuine intention in going about all of this, where you truly want to explore and understand, rather than like a more so of a chore, so to speak, as in, I have to figure out um, the underlying um, causal force for my negative emotion, and why do I have to do this versus, I get to do this because it can open up positive doors and directions for the relationship or circumstance.
Yeah. Yeah, man. It's good stuff.
100%.
Cool.
Well, I think we've hit this one on the head pretty well.
You're starting to break up.
So I think we hit this on the head pretty well. Can you hear me? Oh, internet connection is unstable.
Oh boy. It's a good
Can
time.
you hear me?
Good time to close.
Lose the entire recording. Well, we're redoing it, Keith. You're going to work. You're not going to work today. This is more important.
There should be a disclaimer for the title of this one, like
hella technical
10
difficulties.
interruptions during the recording. Cool. I'm glad we got to squeeze this in, and haven't looked at this in like a week and a half. But again, I just think it's one that's kind of always on the back of my mind. But when I read something like this, it makes it a little bit closer to my conscious awareness. So it's a nice, something nice to be reminded of. And I think for people that are maybe kind of feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the fog, I would just say, like, one thing at a time, right? Or like, even if you're trying to live in the present, it's, don't worry about all the things that you've pushed in the fog previously. But just think about the next interaction you have with somebody, being aware of if something kind of surfaces and working on addressing it in the moment, right? And I think again, there's just a lot of potential there to better ourselves and better our reality.
I love it.
Yeah.
Nice concluding thoughts.
Cool.
Well,
I gotta get ready for work.
This concludes Rule 3 of Peterson's Beyond Order. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to comment your opinions, questions, thoughts. We love to hear it. But thank you again for watching. Fix all your technical shit qualities.
I kind of love it. I love all the things that go.
Hey, it adds a level of authenticity to it. All right.
Oh, yeah.
We're struggling out here to give you this beautiful information coming out of our mouths.
Yeah, we'll be in a studio in like 10 years.
Yeah. We'll remember the real one, the ones who hopped on first. So keep that in mind. We'll take care of you in the long run.
Very true. Very true. All right, bro.
Well,
I
with
gotta go.
that, goodbye, sir. Have a great
All right, man.
day.
You too.